My name is Rebecca. I am 29 years old. Tonight, at my sister Sabrina's lavish engagement party, my parents, Alistair and Natalia, publicly presented her with a heavy, polished quartz vaccine vial case. It was supposed to contain my life's medical formula patent registry, the product of 7 years of my intense pharmaceutical research. Instead, it contained a corporate eviction order to erase me completely from the family heritage registry. I want to be precise about the word eviction because it is the legally accurate term. The document inside that glowing quartz case was a legally filed estate restructuring instrument. It stated that I am being removed from the family's multi-million-dollar pharmaceutical asset pool entirely. Sabrina is being named the sole heir to the $920,000 family laboratory estate and all global medical licensing rights. This document had been prepared and filed by my parents without my knowledge, without my consent, and without any prior professional assessment. They stood at the front of the room with the composed certainty of people who believe every element of their plan is proceeding exactly as designed. The engagement party room was a large, deliberately opulent space in the family's main estate. Amber lighting produced warm, directional pools across the tables, catching the gold, mechanical latches of the quartz case. The surface refracted the light, making the case glow with a cold internal luminosity visible to all 40 wealthy guests. The room carried the specific fragrance of pharmaceutical industry wealth, catering luxury, and social alliance. Alistair stood at the front, his voice filling the space with the particular authority of a patriarch performing a generational legacy transfer. He presented the document at 9:02 p.m., framing it as a loving formalization of the family's scientific future, using phrases like natural succession of pharmaceutical vision. Natalia stood beside him, her expression perfectly rehearsed. Then, Sabrina leaned toward me from her seat beside mine. In a low voice not intended for the guests, she told me that I had always been a placeholder. She said my only function had been to carry the family's clinical debt burden through the difficult research years by paying the laboratory maintenance and estate bills from my salary. Now that she had secured a wealthy medical tech marriage alliance, she explained, the pharmaceutical asset structure could be properly consolidated within the correct family line. She said it with the complete relief of someone delivering a long-held conclusion, then straightened up and returned her attention to the front of the room. I looked at the polished quartz case on the table, then down at my phone lying face up beside my place setting. The screen was showing the Federal Bioasset Compliance Monitor Grid application, which I use to monitor the global pharmaceutical patent verification network in real time. On the dark map, active medical formula registrations and laboratory patent clearances showed up as precise blue lines. The cluster corresponding to my family's pharmaceutical laboratory estate was visible as a dense configuration of active patent registrations. I put my left hand into my lap beneath the white table linen. What my family did not know is that I am the Chief Sovereign Director for the Federal Bioasset Verification and Medical Patent Protection Bureau. My sovereign authority covers every high-value pharmaceutical liquidation, trust verification, and clinical formula registry clearance across the continental network. Crucially, the legacy generational distribution waiver that my parents' entire biotech business and laboratory structure relies on to avoid massive retroactive patent penalties and manufacturing forfeiture passes directly through my private bureau jurisdiction. Alistair and Natalia had never asked what my bureau role actually controlled. Sabrina had spent years describing my work to her social circle as mere government medical filing work. In reality, that legacy waiver had been clearing through my jurisdiction every quarter for 8 years. My parents had been maintaining their entire lifestyle on top of it without understanding what it was built on. Beneath the table linen, I opened my secure global forensic bioasset terminal on my phone. I entered my chief director's sovereign authorization and located the legacy generational distribution waiver registered to the family estate. As the master of ceremonies moved toward the microphone to begin the engagement toast, I began entering the administrative override sequence. I pressed the final confirmation key. Instantly, a Level 1 forensic bioasset quarantine initialized across every bank account, every patent registry entry, and every corporate laboratory entity registered to Alistair, Natalia, and Sabrina simultaneously. I placed my hand flat on my knee, looked at the glowing quartz case, and waited for their phones to tell them exactly who had been authorizing their existence every quarter for the last 8 years. It was 9:12 p.m. The master of ceremonies had raised his microphone. Champagne glasses were lifted, and the room was charged with anticipation. Then Alistair's phone produced a sharp, high-priority notification tone. It was the distinct alert used exclusively by the Bureau's sovereign quarantine system when delivering a Level 1 forensic lockdown notice to a flagged pharmaceutical entity. It was not a sound that belonged at an engagement party, and the room registered its arrival with immediate confusion. On my phone, the compliance monitor grid updated at 9:12 p.m. and 20 seconds. The transition pattern moved across the map, and the precise gold lines showing my family's Continental Laboratory estate turned into a flashing amber and crimson warning pattern. The total registry lockdown covered every asset they owned. I placed my phone face down on the table and looked at my father. Alistair's champagne glass came down hard on the white linen, harder than he intended. The crystal base clicked sharply against the table as he read the notifications flooding his screen. His face completely lost its composed warmth. The expression of a patriarch executing a master plan vanished, replaced by utter bewilderment. His carefully prepared estate restructuring had not accounted for a Level 1 sovereign forensic quarantine. By 9:12 p.m. and 37 seconds, Sabrina dropped her engagement menu and reached for her phone. Her first call was to their senior patent attorney. Because of the lockdown, the line routed automatically through the Bureau's secure federal intercept layer, which accepted the call and produced an automated bioasset registry compliance recording prompt. Shocked, Sabrina ended the call and dialed the medical registry director. That line, too, routed through the intercept layer, playing the exact same automated prompt. Panicking, she turned to Alistair, who was staring blankly at his device. She began routing the crisis upward through every channel she believed held resolution authority, dialing contact after contact from her seat in her formal evening wear. Every single channel produced the same sovereign institutional silence and the same automated compliance prompt. The intercept layer logged every single attempt as secondary evidence artifacts in the Bureau's active fraud case file. At 9:13 p.m., Alistair entered his master corporate biometric access key into the family laboratory estate management platform. The platform immediately blocked him, returning a sovereign quarantine suspension notice in amber and crimson. He entered the key again, harder this time, and received the same error. He tried a third time with the desperate pressure of a man accustomed to overriding obstacles through sheer insistence. Each attempt was logged by the Bureau's quarantine system as an unauthorized data breach signature. These logged signatures automatically triggered the system's hardening protocol, compounding the quarantine's resistance to external override. Alistair was inadvertently locking his own system down tighter with every single touch. And our active case file grew larger by the minute. The 40 wealthy guests, who had arrived expecting a high society celebration, sat in absolute silence, watching the host family process a sovereign crisis in real time. The master of ceremonies lowered his microphone, entirely speechless. Raised champagne glasses remained suspended in midair by guests who no longer knew what they were celebrating. I sat calmly with both hands resting on the table surface. The amber and crimson warnings from their phones reflected off the gold latches of the quartz case. Every laboratory account, every formula patent, and every corporate entity belonging to my family was completely frozen. The room produced the specific, heavy silence of a space where no acceptable social response exists. I looked at the quartz case, and I said absolutely nothing. By 9:35 p.m. on Sunday night, the atmosphere in the engagement room had completely turned. The 40 wealthy guests had quietly shifted away from the head table, creating distance from a host family that was suddenly toxic. The engagement toast was abandoned. Alistair, Natalia, and Sabrina sat clustered together in sheer panic. Meanwhile, my secure bureau terminal was actively displaying the automated forensic extraction. The system was rapidly pulling every filing record and medical trust document associated with the family's credentials, organizing them into structured data packets. As I read the incoming data, I saw the full extent of the systematic criminal scheme that had been running for 8 consecutive years, the exact years I had spent paying their bills. The documents proved that the year after my global medical licensing rights were formally registered under my individual professional profile, Alistair, Natalia, and Sabrina began using the legacy waiver fraudulently. Instead of using it for routine laboratory operations, they had used it to secretly re-register my global medical licensing rights under Sabrina's name inside the family firm's corporate identity through forged medical trust signatures. For 8 consecutive years, the massive medical licensing revenue from my research had been flowing directly into Sabrina's personal luxury bank account. Meanwhile, Alistair and Natalia had repeatedly told me that the laboratory estate funds were chronically insufficient. I had believed them, using my own hard-earned bureau salary to pay the family's actual clinical debt, laboratory maintenance fees, and estate insurance. At 9:50 p.m., my phone terminal updated. The completed criminal laboratory fraud and formula registry conspiracy indictment file locked permanently into the federal judicial database, verified with 62 individual evidence items. The status field updated to judicial database confirmed. The trap was officially sprung. On Tuesday afternoon at 2:01 p.m., I was standing at the floor-to-ceiling glass partition wall on the 8th floor of the Bureau's Central Compliance Headquarters, looking down into the main security reception lobby 4 floors below. The proximity alert on my workstation terminal had just notified me that the registered identity credentials of Alistair, Natalia, and Sabrina had been detected at the building's external entry processing point. At 2:06 p.m., Alistair entered the lobby, moving with the aggressive forward momentum of a man who concluded that demanding physical presence would force a resolution. Natalia marched beside him, clutching a thick document folder, with Sabrina following a step behind, flanked by 4 senior legal attorneys. At 2:10 p.m., Alistair marched to the biometric checkpoint and pressed his elite credential card against the reader panel. The system processed it in under 3 seconds. The gate did not open. Instead, the status display flashed an alert in heavy, sovereign gold text. Level 1 Forensic Bioasset Quarantine active. The heavy mechanical steel barrier engaged its lock position with a loud click. The registry had cross-referenced his card against the active fraud case the microsecond it touched the scanner. Alistair stepped back, staring at the flashing gold display. From the 8th floor, I watched him realize that the exact same corporate wall was now standing directly in front of him, identically impenetrable. The final reveal occurred at 2:21 p.m. Dr. Evelyn Vance, the Bureau's chief compliance validator, stepped through the internal security doors. Flanked by two senior network security engineers, she carried a single, sealed document sleeve. She walked directly to the family's senior attorney and spoke in a measured level register for exactly 55 seconds. I watched the senior attorney's posture completely collapse. It was the specific physical transition legal professionals make when they realize the information being delivered by the state is materially and fundamentally inconsistent with the fabricated narrative their clients had given them. At 2:24 p.m., Dr. Vance opened the sleeve, pulled out a single page of the forensic ledger, and handed it to the attorney. The attorney read it, looked at Alistair in shock, and then turned a cold gaze toward Sabrina. With a single professional gesture that left absolutely no room for interpretation, the security guards pointed toward the corridor leading to the secure administrative verification room. By 3:16 p.m., I was standing at the glass presentation terminal on the north wall of my executive compliance suite on the 8th floor. Above the waist-high console, 4 massive digital projection screens were displaying the live compliance monitor feed of the active fraud case. On the dark composite desk in the center of the room sat a single object: the heavy polished quartz vaccine vial case. My assistant had transferred it from the evidence archive on my explicit instruction. At 3:21 p.m., the suite door opened, and they were escorted inside. Alistair entered first, followed by Natalia and a trembling Sabrina. I stood facing them, dressed in my official Chief Sovereign Director uniform, complete with the gold Bioasset Protection Authority insignia on my left chest and the High Director rank designation on my collar. Alistair looked up and recognized me instantly. In under 2 seconds, his face underwent a total structural dismantling of every assumption he had held since Sunday night. Natalia gasped, and Sabrina's face completely dropped. She finally realized that the sister she had dismissively labeled a placeholder at the dinner table was the Chief Sovereign Director who held the absolute keys to the entire continental network. Then their eyes moved past me to the walls. The 4 massive projection screens were broadcasting the full forensic ledger. The upper left screen displayed the 8-year unauthorized medical licensing revenue transaction log, highlighted in bright crimson theft markup text. The upper right screen showed the biometric match analysis, proving the forged signatures. The lower left screen showed their $920,000 laboratory estate listed under a sovereign forensic validation hold. The lower right screen displayed the finalized criminal indictment file, detailing 62 individual evidence items. Alistair tried to use his booming patriarch voice, stammering out words like family and misunderstanding. I let him talk for exactly 104 seconds until his prepared vocabulary completely ran out. Then, in the level, unvarying tone I use for all official compliance briefings, I stated the cold facts. I looked directly into Sabrina's eyes and told them that the Bureau's sovereign regulations governing bioasset fraud contain absolutely zero discretionary provisions. At 3:44 p.m., the live compliance monitor automatically updated their statuses to criminal fraud suspects under active prosecution referral. I placed my palm on the biometric scanner, entered my dual sovereign authorization code, and pressed the final transmission key. The official sovereign prosecution lodgment reference number populated the display, locking them into the federal judiciary system. My family stood frozen, entirely trapped by the framework. The federal security escorts entered the suite and escorted them out. Not a single one of them dared to look at the polished quartz case sitting on my desk as they walked past it. Over the following 3 months, the Bureau processed the asset recovery and penalty procedures with mechanical consistency. The authority issued a massive liquidation order covering the full recovery value of the 8 years of stolen revenue, paired with a compounding penalty structure. The calculation completely decimated their corporate equity and primary estate holdings. Their business portfolio was systematically liquidated. The legacy waiver was revoked, and the global medical licensing rights were officially restored to my individual inventor profile as a matter of permanent public record. On a Thursday evening, 3 months later, I stood on the narrow stone balcony outside my suite. It was raining. I held my phone face up in my right hand. The screen was completely clean. There were 0 notifications. The fragile glass house they had built on top of my labor was completely gone, but I was still standing on my own sovereign foundation. I turned, walked back inside my office, and began to read.